A homeless girl holds a torn photo in the rain. When the billionaire asks who it is, she says, "It was me with my mom before she left me." Upon seeing the photo, he is shocked and begins to cry. The sky over New York was bursting with icy tears that late November afternoon. Patrick Gibson watched the storm from the window of his office on the 42nd floor, where the world below looked like a blurred, insignificant, grey speck. He liked this view. People reduced to dots, problems minimized by distance. It was reassuring in a way, like he could control the chaos. "Mr. Gibson, the acquisition documents for Meridian Tech are ready for your signature." Patrick turned to Diane, his executive assistant for over 12 years. She was efficient and discreet, precisely what he valued. "Leave them on the desk. I'll review them before I go." She nodded and left silently. Patrick turned his gaze back to the city. Gibson Enterprises had just closed its third consecutive quarter with record profits. The financial market treated him like a visionary. Business magazines called him the relentless genius, a title he did not refute. Relentless was what he needed to be. It was what had brought him this far. His fingers tapped on the cold surface of the window. 58 years old, a billionaire, respected, feared, and completely alone. The phone on the desk rang. "Mr. Gibson, your board meeting has been moved up to tomorrow at 9. And Mr. Harrington called 3 times. It seems urgent. Tell him I'll get back to him when it's convenient." Patrick hung up without waiting for a response. Harrington could wait. Everyone could. After all, having power meant exactly that, dictating everyone else's timing. He grabbed his coat and looked at the clock. 6:30. There was no reason to go home early, but no reason to stay either. The truth was, his office and the mansion on the outskirts of the city were equally empty. Only the scenery of the emptiness changed. In the private elevator, Patrick adjusted his expensive tie and massaged his temples. A headache was creeping in. He needed a drink, maybe 2. The lobby was deserted at that hour, another benefit of being the last to leave. The rain intensified as he crossed the glass doors toward the sidewalk, where his driver was supposed to be waiting. But the black Bentley was nowhere to be seen. He frowned, annoyed. He never had to wait. But before he could pull out his phone to call and express his displeasure, he noticed a note stuck to the inside wall of the covered entryway. "Mr. Gibson, a family emergency came up. The substitute driver will arrive in 30 minutes. Sorry for the inconvenience." Patrick scoffed. A family emergency, always families getting in the way of efficiency. He put his phone back in his pocket. He wouldn't make that angry call. It wasn't worth it. His driver, Marcus, was good at what he did. He decided to walk to the nearby garage where he kept an extra car. It would be faster than waiting. Opening his umbrella, he ventured out into the storm, feeling icy droplets hit his face despite the protection. That's when he saw it. At first, just a colorful blur in the gray landscape. Then, a defined shape. A child huddled beneath a narrow awning half a block away, visibly soaked. Patrick normally would have walked right by. New York was full of sad stories, and he wasn't the type to get involved. He was the type who signed checks for charities at galas and then moved on with his life. Something, however, made him slow his pace. Maybe it was the contrast of the small figure against the towering urban setting, or the fact that the child seemed utterly alone. No adults nearby, no sign of supervision. The rain was falling harder now. Patrick stopped. It was a girl, 9 or 10 years old maybe, blonde hair, darkened by the water and plastered to her pale face. She wore a coat far too thin for the weather, clutching something against her chest as if it were a treasure. She shivered visibly. "Hey," Patrick called, keeping his distance. "Are you all right? Where are your parents?" The girl looked up, startled. Blue eyes, intensely blue. Something in that look stirred a strange feeling in Patrick, like a distant echo. "I don't have parents," she said, her small voice almost drowned out by the pounding rain. Patrick approached, extending the umbrella to cover her. "You shouldn't be alone in this weather. Where do you live?" The girl hesitated, clearly told not to speak to strangers, but so obviously in need of help that distrust battled with necessity. "I have nowhere to live right now," she finally replied. Patrick studied her more closely. Despite the wet clothes and dirty face, there was something dignified about her. She didn't look like a child who had been homeless for long. There was a certain composure in the way she stood. "What's your name?" "Maisie." "Maisie, last name?" She hesitated. "Clark." Patrick felt a jolt in his chest. Clark. A name he had buried long ago, along with memories he preferred to forget. "Where is your mother, Maisie?" he asked, his voice shifting subtly. The girl's eyes filled with tears, but she held them back with an impressive dignity for someone so young. "Mom died 3 days ago." The words hung between them, heavy, mingling with the relentless rain. Patrick felt pressure building in his chest. "I'm sorry," he said, and for the first time in many years, he truly meant it. "And there's no one to take care of you." Maisie shook her head. "Mom said I should find the man in the photo, that he would help me." It was then that Patrick noticed what she was clutching to her chest. It was a photograph, protected by a makeshift plastic cover, already creased by her small fingers. "May I see?" he asked. Hesitantly, Maisie extended the torn photo. Patrick took it carefully, as though it might disintegrate at any moment. And then time stopped. It was Rachel. His Rachel. Older than the last time he'd seen her, but unmistakably his daughter. The same determined smile, the same eyes that now stared at him through the little girl before him. The photo was torn exactly where another person should have been. Him, Patrick realized. An old picture from before the fight, before he kicked her out of the house. "This," his voice faltered, "this is your mom." Maisie nodded. Rachel Clark, the best mom in the world, the maiden name of his ex-wife. Rachel had left the name Gibson behind, just as he had left her behind. Patrick felt the world spin. In front of him stood his granddaughter, a granddaughter he never knew existed. The daughter of the daughter he had kicked out 8 years ago, when Rachel decided to follow her own path instead of joining the family business. "Did you know my mother?" Maisie asked, her blue eyes, Rachel's mother's eyes, fixed on him. Patrick swallowed hard. "I did. A long time ago." "Are you the man in the photo?" The question was direct, but Patrick realized she didn't recognize him. How could she? The last time he saw Rachel, she was 22. Maisie probably hadn't even been born yet. "Why do you think that?" he asked cautiously. "Because you stopped to talk to me. No one else stopped. And Mom said he would look important." A knot formed in Patrick's throat. Important. That's how the world saw him. Important, powerful, successful, but not as a father. Never as a father. "Did your mom talk about him?" Patrick asked, avoiding confirming or denying Maisie's question. The girl nodded. "Not much. Just that he was a busy man, that he built big things, and that I should look for him if anything happened to her." Patrick felt the weight of those words. Rachel, even after everything, had given her daughter one last lifeline, him. She trusted that, despite it all, he wouldn't turn his back on his own granddaughter. "Are you hungry?" he asked, suddenly aware that the girl was shivering with cold. The rain continued to pour around them, but it now seemed less important. Maisie nodded almost imperceptibly. "I haven't eaten since yesterday." Something broke inside Patrick. His granddaughter, his own flesh and blood, was hungry and alone on the streets of New York, while he signed million-dollar contracts in his comfortable office. "Let's get out of this rain," he said, extending his hand. "I know a place nearby where we can eat and talk." Maisie looked at the outstretched hand, hesitant. "Mom said not to go with strangers." "Your mom was right," Patrick replied seriously, "but I think in this case she'd make an exception." After a moment's consideration, Maisie took his hand. It was small and cold. Patrick felt a responsibility he hadn't experienced in years. They walked together under the umbrella to a diner on the corner. The place was simple, but warm and dry. The kind of establishment Patrick usually wouldn't frequent, but now seemed the coziest in the world. They sat at a booth in the back. Patrick removed his wet coat and noticed Maisie had nothing to change into. "Are you very cold?" he asked, concerned. "I'm used to it," she replied with a dignity that broke his heart. A waitress approached, looking curiously at the unlikely pair. "A hot chocolate for the young lady," Patrick ordered. "And a sandwich." "What do you like in a sandwich?" he asked Maisie. "Anything," she answered softly. "I'm not picky." The house special for her, Patrick decided, and a coffee for me. When the waitress left, a silence fell between them. Patrick looked at the girl in front of him. There was so much of Rachel in her, the shape of her face, the determined chin, the intelligence in her eyes. "What happened to your mum?" he finally asked. Maisie took a deep breath. She was sick for a long time, but she kept saying she'd be fine. Her small voice didn't tremble, but her eyes betrayed the pain. She wasn't. And there was no one else, no other family. Just the two of us. It was always just us. Patrick felt the weight of guilt settling on his shoulders. Rachel had faced an illness, perhaps terminal, alone. She had raised a child alone, died alone, while he accumulated fortunes. "Where have you been since your mum passed?" "With the neighbor, Mrs. Martinez. She was kind but said she couldn't keep me. She has 5 kids. Maisie held up the torn photo again. "She helped me look for the man in the picture. Told me I should start at the Gibson Enterprises building." Patrick caught his breath. The woman knew the connection, knew who he was. "That's why you were there," Maisie nodded. "I've been waiting 2 days. Mrs. Martinez said he always leaves by that door, but there were so many people, and it was raining." The waitress returned with the hot chocolate and coffee. Maisie took the mug with both hands, savoring its warmth. She took a sip, and her eyes lit up momentarily, a glimpse of childlike joy that pierced Patrick's heart. "Is it good?" he asked. She nodded, a small chocolate mustache forming on her upper lip. "Maisie," Patrick began carefully, "what did your mum tell you about your dad?" The girl lowered her eyes. "She said he left before I was born, that he was an artist she met in Paris, but that he wasn't a bad person. He just wasn't ready to be a father." A merciful lie. Rachel had spared her daughter the painful truth about her grandfather. She never told her how he had kicked her out of the house when she chose to study art rather than business. The sandwich arrived, and Maisie attacked it with restrained hunger, trying not to look desperate but obviously starving. Patrick watched her eat, thinking of all the meals he'd missed with Rachel, and now with Maisie. "When did your mom get sick?" he asked, trying to piece together the last 8 years. "She was always a bit sick," Maisie replied between bites. "But she got worse this past year. She had to stop painting. She was too tired." Patrick felt as though he'd been punched. Rachel had followed her dream. Then she had become an artist, despite him. "Did your mom sell her paintings?" Maisie nodded proudly. "She was famous in our neighborhood. People came from far away to buy her work. Landscapes, mostly. She gave lessons too." Patrick tried to imagine the life Rachel had built. Modest, certainly. Very different from what he had planned for her, but apparently filled with purpose and love. "And school? Do you go?" "Of course," Maisie replied, sounding slightly offended. "Mom said education is the one thing no one can take from you." Words he himself had once said to Rachel decades before. She had passed them on. The sandwich quickly disappeared. Color returned to Maisie's face, her eyes more alert now that she'd eaten. "And now," she asked suddenly, "Mrs. Martinez said I can't go back. She said the man in the photo would take care of me." Patrick felt the weight of the decision. He was the man in the photo, the man Rachel, despite everything, had indicated as a refuge for her daughter. "Do you trust me, Maisie?" he asked, unsure if he deserved that trust. She studied him with eyes surprisingly perceptive for a child. "I don't know yet. But Mom trusted you, and that means a lot." Patrick felt something break inside him. Rachel still trusted him, even after everything. She had sent her daughter, her most precious treasure, to him. "Do you know who I am?" he finally asked. Maisie shook her head. "A rich man who knew my mom." Patrick took a deep breath. He wasn't ready for the whole truth. Not now. Not in this fragile moment. "I'm someone who's going to take care of you," he answered, "if you'll let me." Maisie studied him again. "You're the man from the photo," she concluded. It wasn't a question this time. Patrick neither confirmed nor denied. Instead, he asked, "Do you have any belongings, clothes, toys?" "A backpack. At Mrs. Martinez's place." "Shall we pick it up?" Maisie nodded. It's near here, in Brooklyn. Patrick pulled out his phone and sent a message to his driver, cancelling the pickup. He had something more important to do. Outside, the rain was subsiding, a reflection of what was happening inside him. The storm quieting, giving way to something new. Uncertain, frightening, but somehow more real than anything he'd felt in years. "Let's go get your things, then," he said, standing up and leaving more than enough money to cover the bill. "And afterward we'll figure out the next steps." Maisie slid off the seat, still holding the torn photograph. Patrick looked at her, the granddaughter he never knew he had, the second chance he knew he didn't deserve. As they walked out onto the street, the rain had become a light drizzle. Patrick opened the umbrella anyway, mostly covering Maisie. While they walked side by side, he felt something awaken within him, something he thought had died long ago. Hope. The Bentley wound its way through increasingly tree-lined, exclusive streets, leaving the bustle of the city behind. Maisie, in the back seat with her worn backpack on her lap, stared silently out the window. The trip from Mrs. Martinez's apartment had been quiet. Patrick had tried a few times to start a conversation, but Maisie's monosyllabic answers soon discouraged him. Finally, the car turned onto a private drive flanked by perfectly manicured trees until it stopped in front of an imposing mansion. It was a modern structure, all clean lines, glass and concrete, without the flourish or warmth of traditional homes. "We're here," Patrick announced, watching Maisie's reaction. The girl gazed at the house, wide-eyed. "You live here? By yourself?" Her question, so direct and simple, caught Patrick off guard. "Yes," he replied, then added, as though he had to justify something, "It's convenient for work." The truth was that this mansion, with its 6 bedrooms, indoor pool, gym, and movie room, had never been intended to be inhabited by him alone. It was designed for a family that never materialized, for the family he lost. Thomas, the driver, opened the car door. "Welcome back, sir. Should I take the young lady's luggage?" Patrick almost laughed at the formality referring to Maisie's small, battered backpack, which she clutched as if it contained treasures. "No, that's fine. You can park the car, Thomas. I won't need it anymore tonight." Maisie followed Patrick to the main entrance, taking small, hesitant steps on the perfectly aligned gravel. The front door, an impressive piece of dark wood and glass, opened automatically as they approached. "Security system," Patrick explained, noticing the girl jump. "The house recognizes when I'm approaching." The interior was even more imposing than the exterior. The foyer, with its double-height ceiling and floating staircase, looked straight out of an architecture magazine. Everything was immaculate, minimalist, and Maisie instantly noticed cold. "You have a really big house," she observed, her voice echoing slightly in the empty space. "Bigger than I need," Patrick admitted, suddenly aware of the extravagance as seen through a child's eyes. There were no scattered toys, no shoes lying around, no coats casually hung up, no sign of any child or family life. It was a showpiece, not a home. "I'll show you where you'll stay," he said, leading her up the staircase. "There are several guest rooms. You can pick whichever you like." Maisie climbed the steps slowly, one hand on the stainless steel railing, the other clutching her backpack strap. Patrick noticed that she looked around attentively, at the abstract artwork on the walls, the minimalist sculptures in the niches, the complete absence of family photos. The second-floor hallway was wide and silent, with identical doors at regular intervals. Patrick opened the first on the right. "This is one of the guest rooms. It has its own bathroom and—" Maisie peeked inside. The room was sleek, with a king-size bed, contemporary furniture in shades of grey and blue, and a view of the backyard garden. It was perfectly arranged and utterly impersonal. "It looks like a hotel," the girl commented candidly. Patrick swallowed. It was true. The entire place felt like a luxury hotel, spotless, comfortable, and utterly soulless. "Let's see the others," he suggested, trying not to show how much her comment affected him. They checked 2 more rooms, each as elegantly sterile as the first. In the 4th room, Maisie paused a bit longer. It had a small balcony and warmer tones, with amber accents. "I like this one," she finally decided. Patrick nodded, relieved they had made a decision. Great. This will be your room then. He hesitated, realizing he needed to ask, do you have any more clothes besides what's in your backpack? Maisie shook her head. Just what Mrs. Martinez could grab from our apartment. The rest... She didn't finish the sentence, but Patrick understood. The rest was probably now inaccessible. The apartment closed up after Rachel's death. All right, tomorrow we'll get whatever you need. Patrick glanced at his watch. You must be tired. Do you want to rest a bit before dinner? The girl seemed to consider the offer. Can I take a bath? Of course. The bathroom's over there. Patrick indicated a door in the corner of the room. There are clean towels in the cabinet. If you need anything, I'll be downstairs. Just call. Maisie nodded, still clutching her backpack protectively. Patrick hesitated at the door. Was there something else he should say, something he should do? The situation felt so strange, so far outside his comfort zone, that he felt utterly lost. Thank you, Maisie said simply, breaking the silence. Patrick felt a lump in his throat. There's nothing to thank me for. Get some rest. Dinner will be at 7. He left the room, closing the door gently behind him. In the hallway, he allowed himself a moment of controlled panic. What was he doing? He knew nothing about caring for children. He hadn't even known how to care for his own daughter when he had the chance. He hurried down the stairs and headed to his office, the one place in the house where he felt at ease. Sitting at the heavy oak desk, he picked up the phone. Martha, I need you here early tomorrow. Yes, I know it's your day off, but a situation has come up. My granddaughter is here. He paused, hearing his housekeeper's surprised exclamation on the other end. Yes, my granddaughter. I'll explain everything tomorrow. For now, please prepare dinner for 2 tonight. Something a child might like. After hanging up, Patrick opened the bottom drawer of his desk and pulled out a bottle of whiskey and a glass. He poured a generous measure and took a long sip, feeling the amber liquid burn his throat. What would Rachel say if she could see him now? His daughter, whom he had thrown out for defying his expectations, had entrusted her own daughter to him on her deathbed. The irony was too painful to face sober. The whiskey did little to calm his thoughts. After a second glass, he decided to check on Maisie. Leaving his office, he noticed the house was eerily silent. Not just the usual silence, but a different kind of an expectant hush, as though the space itself were holding its breath. He climbed the stairs quietly and stopped in front of the girl's door. He heard no sound of running water. Maybe she'd finished her bath already. He knocked softly. Maisie, everything all right in there? When there was no answer, he felt a pang of worry. He knocked again, a little louder. Maisie, still no response. He decided to open the door just to check. The room was empty. The backpack lay on the bed, open, with some clothes neatly folded beside it, but the girl was nowhere to be seen. A wave of panic hit him. Where could she have gone? The house was far too large for a child to explore alone. There was the indoor pool, the basement. So many places where something could happen. Maisie, he called more loudly, his voice echoing down the hallway. After checking the bathroom and confirming it was empty, Patrick headed into the corridor, calling her name over and over. He checked the other bedrooms, the mezzanine, the upstairs library. Nothing. He practically ran down the stairs, his mind conjuring increasingly alarming scenarios. What if she had gone outside? What if she decided she didn't want to stay with a stranger? What if she was lost somewhere on the property? That was when he heard it. A sound so out of place in that silent house that it took him a moment to register it. A child humming softly. Following the sound, Patrick reached the formal living room, a space he rarely used, preferring the comfort of his office. There, sitting on the floor in front of the unlit fireplace, was Maisie, her hair still damp from the bath, wearing clean clothes, and surrounded by a few small objects Patrick couldn't identify from a distance. Maisie, he breathed in relief. I was looking for you. The girl looked up, surprised. Sorry, I finished my bath quickly and wanted to see the house. Patrick approached and saw what she had in front of her, a small worn rag doll, 2 children's books, and an intricately carved wooden box, open to reveal some childish drawings and what looked like more photographs. "Are those your things?" he asked, sitting on the nearby sofa. Maisie nodded. "My treasures," she explained seriously. "Mom said I should bring what was most important." Patrick looked at the modest collection. Was this all that was left of her life with Rachel? A few toys, books, and memories that fit in a small backpack. "Can I see?" he asked gently. After a brief hesitation, Maisie picked up one of the books and handed it to him. It was a worn copy of The Little Prince. "It was Mom's favorite," she explained. "She read it to me every night." Patrick flipped through it carefully. On the first page, there was a handwritten dedication. "For my Maisie, always remember, what is essential is invisible to the eye. With love, Mom." The handwriting was unmistakably Rachel's. He handed the book back, afraid Maisie would see the emotion in his eyes. "Your mom had good taste in books." The girl smiled for the first time since he'd met her, a small smile that lit up her face for an instant before fading. "Do you have children?" she asked abruptly, her blue eyes, Rachel's eyes, fixed on him. The question hit Patrick like a punch. How to answer? The full truth was too complex for this fragile moment. But lying felt wrong. "Not anymore," he finally replied, his voice rougher than intended. Maisie tilted her head, considering. "What happened to them?" Patrick took a deep breath. "She's gone. A long time ago." "Did she die like my mum?" "No," Patrick answered, feeling the weight of the truth. "She left because of me." Maisie studied him with unsettling intensity. "You fought with her?" "Yes," he admitted. "I wanted her to be someone she didn't want to be." The girl nodded, as if the answer made perfect sense to her. "Mum used to say people need to be who they are, not what others want them to be." Patrick almost smiled at the irony. It was exactly the kind of thing Rachel would say. "Your mum was very wise." "I miss her," Maisie said simply, turning her attention back to the rag doll, adjusting its faded dress. "I know," Patrick replied, though he really had no idea what she was feeling. He had chosen to lose Rachel. Maisie had no choice. They sat in silence for a few moments, a silence less tense than before. Finally, Patrick stood. "Dinner should be ready soon. Are you hungry?" Maisie nodded, starting to carefully put her treasures back into the wooden box. "This house is so big," she commented as she closed the box. "Like a museum. Don't you feel lonely here?" Another direct question, hitting the mark. Patrick rarely thought about it, or maybe he thought about it all the time, without admitting it. "I'm used to it," he replied, echoing the words Maisie had used earlier about being cold. The girl stood, holding the box. "Can I put my treasures in my room before dinner?" "Of course. I'll go with you." As they climbed the stairs side by side, Patrick found himself acutely aware of how their footsteps sounded different together. His heavy and measured, hers light and quick. Adult footsteps. Child footsteps. Sounds he never expected to hear in his house. In the bedroom, Maisie placed the box carefully on the dresser and looked around. "Can I bring my doll to dinner?" she asked hesitantly. "Cece doesn't like to be alone." Patrick blinked, surprised by the question. "Sure," he replied, feeling awkward. "Cece is welcome at the table." Maisie smiled again, this time a bit wider, and picked up the doll. Together they went down to the dining room, where Martha had prepared what looked like mac and cheese, something Patrick hadn't eaten in decades. The dining table, a large piece of glass and metal designed to seat 12, looked absurdly big for just one man and a small girl with her rag doll. "Can we eat in the kitchen?" Maisie asked, eyeing the formal table nervously. Patrick hesitated. He always ate in the dining room when he bothered to eat at home. It was the protocol. It was expected, but suddenly it seemed ridiculous. "Why not?" he agreed, surprising even himself. "The kitchen is this way." The kitchen, though large and professionally equipped, was at least warmer than the dining room. It had a small breakfast nook, where Martha had placed 2 steaming bowls of mac and cheese and a basket of bread. They sat opposite each other, Cece propped up on her own chair against the table. Patrick watched as Maisie carefully tasted the pasta. "Is it good?" he asked. The girl nodded. Mom made it differently. But it's good. Patrick realized he had never asked how Rachel cooked. He had never cared about such mundane details of his daughter's life. And now, all those details, how she made pasta, which books she read to her daughter, how she decorated her apartment, were lost forever. What was your home like? He asked, trying to imagine the life Rachel had built. Small, Maisie answered between mouthfuls, but colorful. Mom painted all the walls different colors. My room was light green, like spring leaves. The living room was yellow. The kitchen was blue. Patrick tried to picture Rachel, paintbrush in hand, transforming a simple apartment into a vibrant home for her daughter. The image made his chest ache. She must have been a great mom. The best, Maisie agreed emphatically. Then, after a pause, you don't have photos in your house. Patrick paused, fork halfway to his mouth. No, I don't. Why not? He had no simple answer. How could he explain that photos were too painful? That every image from happier times was a reminder of his failure? I never really thought about it, he lied. Maisie didn't look convinced, but she didn't press further. Instead, she pointed to a framed painting on the kitchen wall, the only artwork in the entire space. It was a simple, still life of fruit in a bowl. Do you like paintings? Patrick looked at the picture as if noticing it for the first time. My wife chose it a long time ago. My grandma? The question caught him off guard. Yes, he replied, realizing it was natural for Maisie to assume, your grandmother. Where is she now? She passed away too, many years ago. Maisie nodded, absorbing the information with the straightforward acceptance children often display. So you've lived alone for a long time. It wasn't really a question, but Patrick felt the need to answer anyway. Yes. Isn't it really sad? The question, so simple and devastating, left Patrick momentarily speechless. Was it sad? Was it terrible? Or was it just normal? He'd grown so used to solitude that he seldom questioned it anymore. Sometimes, he finally admitted, but work keeps my mind occupied. Maisie considered this while finishing her pasta. Mom said work is important, but people are more important. It was as if Rachel were there, speaking through her daughter, delivering all the lessons he hadn't learned in time. Your mom was right, he said quietly. It took me a long time to figure that out. They finished their meal in contemplative silence. Patrick realized it was the most meaningful dinner he'd had in years, not because of any gourmet dish or expensive wine, but because of the simple presence of another person, one who asked questions he had long avoided. It's getting late, he observed, noticing Maisie trying to hide a yawn. You must be exhausted after everything that happened today. The girl nodded, suddenly looking very small and vulnerable. Can I go to bed now? Of course, I'll walk you up to your room. They climbed the stairs again, and Patrick waited while Maisie used the bathroom and changed clothes. When she emerged, she wore a simple pajama with a star print that seemed too small for her. Ready for sleep? He asked awkwardly. Maisie climbed into the oversized bed, holding Cece tightly. Yes. Patrick pulled the covers over her, a gesture he never imagined doing again. If you need anything during the night, my room is at the end of the hall on the left. The girl nodded, her eyes already heavy with sleep. Good night, she murmured. Good night, Maisie, Patrick replied, walking toward the door. He was about to leave when her small voice called him back. Could you leave the door open just a little? And the hallway light on? Such a small request, yet it revealed so much about her fears. Of course, Patrick said, leaving a crack in the door and ensuring the soft glow of the hall light filtered in. Is that good? Yes, Maisie answered, already half asleep. Thank you. Patrick stood in the hallway for a long moment, looking at the girl asleep in a bed too large, in a room too large, in a house too large, a house that had never been designed to accommodate the life and blunt questions of a child. His instinct was to retreat to his office, pour himself another glass of whiskey, and bury himself in work until he forgot about the day's emotional whirlwind. But instead, he went to his own bedroom. He stopped in front of the closed door of Rachel's old bedroom at the end of the corridor, a space untouched for 8 years, like a shrine to a past he couldn't face or let go. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow he would start thinking about the next steps. What to do about school, about legal custody, about Maisie's future, and perhaps his own as well. For now, all he knew was that he had given his granddaughter a roof. Not a home, not yet, just a roof. But maybe, with time and a courage he wasn't sure he possessed, it could become more. 3 days. Only 3 days had passed since Maisie's arrival, and Patrick no longer recognized his own house. The changes weren't huge, but small details that spread throughout the once immaculate rooms. A colorful cup with a unicorn design on the kitchen sink, a small sock forgotten under the coffee table, a children's book left open on the living room sofa. Patrick stopped in front of the sofa, looking at the book. It was The Little Prince, Rachel's favorite. He picked it up carefully, as if it were a fragile relic, and sat down. The pages were marked with small slips of paper where Maisie had drawn her own stars and planets. An involuntary smile formed on his lips. How could such a small child occupy so much space? "Martha," he called, when he saw the housekeeper walk by carrying a basket of laundry. "Yes, sir. Those things I ordered, have they arrived?" Martha smiled, a smile Patrick rarely used to see before. "They just delivered them. I placed everything in the girls' room as you requested." Patrick nodded, pleased. He had ordered a few items for Maisie. Clothes, of course, but also books, drawing materials, and a star-shaped lamp that projected constellations on the ceiling, something he saw online and thought she might like. Small gestures to make her stay more comfortable, he told himself. Just temporary, until he decided on a long-term plan. "Is she upstairs now?" "Yes, sir. She was coloring at your office desk, but I think she went up when the packages arrived." Patrick frowned. "My office?" Martha looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry, sir. She said you gave her permission. I can tell her not to—" No, Patrick interrupted. "It's all right. It just surprised me." In truth, it surprised him greatly. His office was his sanctuary, the one place in the house he considered truly private. Not even Martha went in there uninvited. He climbed the stairs, curious. The door to Maisie's room was slightly ajar, and he could hear her soft voice. Was she talking to someone? He approached silently. "And then we'll paint stars here too," Maisie was saying, apparently to her ragdoll, Cece, which sat on the bed beside several open boxes. "Mom used to paint stars on my ceiling. Did you know? She said that way we could see the constellations even when it rained." Patrick felt a pang in his chest. Little details about Rachel's life kept emerging in Maisie's conversations. Precious fragments of a life he never knew. "Do you like the things that arrived?" Maisie turned, startled. A huge smile lit her face, so genuine that Patrick felt something melt inside him. "Are they all for me?" "Yes," he said, stepping into the room. "I thought you might want some new things, so you could feel more at home." Maisie jumped off the bed and yawned before Patrick could prepare himself, threw her arms around his waist in a sudden, tight hug. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Patrick froze for a moment, then awkwardly placed a hand on her back. The contact felt strange, unfamiliar. When was the last time someone had hugged him like that, with such openness? He couldn't remember. "Look, there's a star lamp," Maisie exclaimed, letting him go and picking up the box. "Just like the one Mom made for me," Patrick smiled, feeling an odd satisfaction that he'd gotten it right. "We can install it tonight if you'd like." "Now," Maisie insisted, her eyes shining. "Can we do it now?" And surprisingly, Patrick found he couldn't refuse her. "Sure. We'll need a few tools." Half an hour later, Patrick Gibson, CEO of Gibson Enterprises, was on a step stool in his granddaughter's room, installing a kid's constellation lamp, while Maisie gave precise instructions on the exact position. "More to the left, so it's right over the bed. Like this." "Perfect." When he finished, Patrick climbed down and sat at the edge of the bed with Maisie. She held the lamp's remote with excitement. "Let's make it dark so we can see it." Patrick got up and closed the curtains, then switched off the light. The room fell into darkness for a second before Maisie turned on the lamp. Suddenly, The ceiling and walls were covered with tiny bluish lights, recreating the main constellations of the night sky. The soft glow lit up Maisie's face in wonder, and Patrick felt something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of pure enchantment. "Yeah, it's just like what Mom did," Maisie whispered, her voice choked with emotion. She painted stars that glowed in the dark. They weren't as pretty as these, but "I'm sure they were more beautiful," Patrick said softly. "Because she made them with her own hands." Maisie nodded, then unexpectedly rested her head against Patrick's arm. Such a simple, natural gesture, yet so powerful that Patrick felt his throat tighten. "I miss Mom," Maisie said quietly, still gazing at the stars. "Sometimes I think she's protecting me, like she's in one of those stars, watching me." Patrick swallowed hard, not sure what to say. He had never been good with words in emotional moments. That's why he'd lost Rachel. He hadn't known how to say what truly mattered. "That's a nice thought," he managed at last. "She'd be very proud of you." They sat there for a few minutes, in silence, looking at the artificial constellations. It was a fragile moment, but real, much like the little changes Maisie brought to the house and to Patrick. In recent weeks, Patrick's only concerns had been business, acquisitions, profits, and losses. Now suddenly, he worried about whether Maisie was eating well, if she needed more clothes, if she'd like art lessons like Rachel. The day before, he had called his lawyer to discuss the possibility of obtaining legal custody. It was a decision he'd never imagined making, but now it felt inevitable. The idea of Maisie entering the foster system or ending up with some distant relative Rachel never mentioned was unthinkable. "What are we doing tomorrow?" Maisie asked, interrupting his thoughts. "Tomorrow," Patrick repeated, caught off guard. "I'm gonna have to work." "But Martha will be here, and do you work every day?" The question was innocent but loaded. Patrick felt uneasy. "Well, yes. Usually. The company needs me." Maisie frowned. "Mom worked a lot too, but we always had Sundays. That was our special day. We'd make pancakes and go to the park." Patrick didn't respond immediately. Sundays had always been just another work day for him. He hadn't done anything like pancakes in the park since Rachel was little. And even then, those moments had been rare. "We can do that if you'd like," he surprised himself by saying. "This Sunday." The smile that spread across Maisie's face was worth more than any deal he could have closed that day. "With chocolate syrup," Patrick laughed. It was a strange sound, almost rusty. He couldn't remember the last time he'd genuinely laughed like that. "With chocolate syrup," he agreed. When he left her room later, leaving Maisie asleep beneath the artificial stars, Patrick felt different, lighter in a way. As though the small presences Maisie scattered throughout the house, a cup here, a book there, an unexpected hug, were filling not just the physical spaces, but also the empty places inside him. It was scary. It was inconvenient. It disrupted his carefully constructed routine. And yet, as he made his way to his own bedroom, he realized that for the first time in years, he had no desire for a drink before bed. He felt none of the usual restlessness, that nagging sensation that something was always missing. Small presences, small changes, perhaps the beginning of a transformation bigger than he was ready to admit. It was almost 2 in the morning when Patrick gave up on trying to sleep. Something about the house, maybe the faint creaking of the hardwood floor in the hallway or the distant hum of the heating system, now felt different, as if Maisie's presence had changed even its familiar night sounds. He got up and put on his robe, feeling the cold marble floor under his bare feet. He opened his bedroom door carefully and peeked into the hallway. The nightlight he had installed for Maisie cast a gentle glow on the wall opposite her door. Patrick approached quietly and peeked through the small opening. The girl was fast asleep. Cece clutched to her chest, the artificial stars still glowing faintly on the ceiling. Patrick stood there for a moment, watching. How strange that this child, who didn't even know who he really was, could sleep so peacefully under his roof. Trusting, vulnerable. He closed the door carefully and went downstairs. The house was immersed in silence, broken only by the grandfather clock in the hall, marking time with relentless precision. Patrick headed to his office, his refuge when sleep wouldn't come. The The room was exactly as he'd left it, with one exception. On his perfectly organized desk was now a sheet of paper with a colorful drawing, a big house with two stick figures in front, one tall, one small. Underneath, in childish, awkward letters, "Me and Mr. Patrick." Something squeezed his heart. Mr. Patrick. Not Grandpa, not even Patrick. He was still a stranger to her, despite the small moments of connection they'd shared. He picked up the drawing, studying it. The house in the picture was bright blue, very different from the grey, austere mansion they lived in. It had colourful flowers in the yard and a smiling yellow sun in the sky. The world as Maisie wished it could be, not as it was. Patrick opened a desk drawer to store the drawing, then stopped. There, beneath neatly organised folders and documents, was a wooden box he hadn't opened in years. He paused, his hand hovering over it. He knew exactly what it contained. That was why he kept it buried there, away from his daily view. He closed his eyes for a moment, gathering courage. Then, slowly, he lifted the box from the drawer. It was small, made of polished dark wood with a bronze hinge, nothing special on the outside. It gave no hint of its contents. But for Patrick, it was like a bomb ready to shatter his carefully maintained emotional distance. He opened it. The first thing he saw was the photo. Rachel at 6 years old, wearing her favorite blue polka dot dress, smiling with two front teeth missing, her blonde hair in uneven pigtails that her mother, Elizabeth, had done that morning. It was the last birthday Elizabeth ever saw. Cancer took her a few months later. Patrick picked up the picture with trembling fingers. How much Maisie resembled Rachel. Or rather, how much Rachel resembled Maisie. The same bright eyes, the same confident smile. Beneath that photo lay others. Rachel learning to ride a bike. Rachel on her first day of school. Rachel blowing out candles on another birthday, this one without Elizabeth. Rachel as a teenager, already wearing that determined expression that both infuriated and made Patrick proud. And then the final photo. Rachel at 22 graduating from the art college Patrick hadn't attended. Someone had sent it to him afterward. Maybe a well-meaning professor. In the picture, Rachel held her diploma, her face shining with pride. A pride Patrick had not shared. "Why did you have to challenge me?" he murmured to the photo, his voice rough in the silent office. "Why couldn't you just follow the path I laid out for you?" But now the question sounded hollow, empty. What was the path he'd planned for Rachel compared to the life she had built on her own? A life with enough love to raise a child alone. A child who drew bright blue houses with smiling suns. Patrick placed the photo on the desk and continued to sift through the box. A handmade Father's Day card from Rachel when she was 7. A small shiny stone she'd found on a beach during a rare family vacation. The car key he had given her on her 18th birthday, returned the night she left. At the bottom of the box, carefully folded, was the letter. Patrick didn't even need to open it to know what it said. Every word was etched in his memory. "Dad, I'm leaving you this letter because I know you won't want to listen to me in person. Maybe you never really listened at all. I can't be the person you want me to be. I can't live the life you planned for me. I need to find my own way, even if you don't understand or approve. I know I'm disappointing you and it breaks my heart. But it would break it even more to spend my life trying to please someone at the cost of my own happiness. I love you, Dad. I hope one day you can love me for who I am, not for who you wanted me to be." Rachel Patrick didn't open the letter. He didn't have to. The words had haunted him for 8 years, and now Rachel was gone. Forever. With no reconciliation. No chance to tell her he had been wrong. No opportunity to know the woman she had become, the mother she had been. The pain Patrick had kept carefully buried all those years came crashing over him like a broken dam. A sob burst from his chest, surprising him with its intensity. Then another, and another. For the first time since Elizabeth's funeral, Patrick Gibson truly cried. He cried for the daughter he'd lost twice, first through his own stubbornness and now forever. He cried for the lost years, the memories never made, the words never spoken. He cried for Rachel, who died thinking her father would never accept her for who she was. He cried for Maisie, who would grow up without her mother. And he cried for himself, a man who built an empire at the cost of everything that really mattered. Maisie's drawing absorbed his tears, causing the colors of the smiling sun to fade slightly. Patrick didn't notice how long he stayed there, bent over his desk, and with Rachel's photographs and mementos scattered before him, time seemed to lose its meaning. When he finally lifted his head, exhausted and drained, the clock in the hall was striking 4. The sun had yet to rise, but Patrick felt as if he had lived an entire lifetime in those solitary hours. Slowly, he began placing the items back in the box: the beach stone, the Father's Day card, the car key, the letter that no longer needed to be opened. But the photo of Rachel at her graduation, the one he hadn't witnessed, remained on the desk. Patrick studied it for a long moment, noticing for the first time how genuinely happy his daughter looked in that image. Truly happy, in a way he'd rarely seen when she lived under his rules and expectations. Rachel had found her path, despite him. She had built a life filled with enough color and love to raise Maisie, despite her father's absence. She died too young, but she lived on her own terms. And now, by some miracle, Patrick knew he didn't deserve, a part of her still lived on. Sleeping upstairs under artificial stars, clutching a rag doll named Cece. Patrick returned the box to the drawer, but put Rachel's graduation photo into an empty frame he found on a shelf. It was a small gesture, perhaps too late, but it was a start. He placed the framed photo on the desk, next to Maisie's drawing. Grandfather and granddaughter, past and future. A chance, maybe, to do things differently this time. With that thought, Patrick finally felt the exhaustion overtake him. He climbed the stairs slowly, stopping again outside Maisie's door. Everything was quiet, peaceful. "I'll try to do better this time, Rachel," he whispered to the empty hallway. "For her, for you, I'll try." When he finally lay down on his bed, Patrick slept dreamlessly for the first time in years. The past had caught up with him at last, and somehow, instead of crushing him as he'd always feared, it set him free. Sunday dawned with a golden brightness that seemed to match Maisie's mood. Since Patrick had promised a day of pancakes in the park, she'd been counting the hours, constantly reminding him to make sure he didn't forget. "You remember today as our special day?" she asked the moment she found him in the kitchen, still wearing her star-print pajamas, Cece firmly in one hand. Patrick, who had been awake for hours and waged his own inner battle about whether to just spend a few hours at the office, smiled at the girl. The photo of Rachel at her graduation, now in a frame on his desk, seemed to watch him the night before as he considered breaking his promise. In the end, he couldn't. "Of course I remember. Pancakes in the park, right?" Maisie's grin lit up the entire kitchen. "With chocolate syrup." "With chocolate syrup," Patrick repeated, feeling a strange contentment at her pure happiness. Together, they prepared the pancake batter. Patrick hadn't cooked in years, maybe decades, but found that he still remembered the recipe Elizabeth used to make when Rachel was small. Maisie insisted on helping, though her help mainly consisted of constant questions and occasionally scattering flour all over the counter. "Did your mum make pancakes for you?" she asked, as she watched Patrick skillfully flip a pancake in the air, much to her delight. "Yes, when I was a kid," Patrick replied, surprising himself at how easily the memory came. "My mother made the best Sunday breakfasts." "My mum did too," Maisie exclaimed enthusiastically. "She said Sunday breakfast was magical because we could eat sugar without worrying." Patrick laughed, a sound that was becoming less strange by the day. "She always had a sweet tooth, even when she was little." Maisie looked at him with sudden curiosity. "You knew my mum when she was little?" The question hung in the air like the aroma of pancakes. Patrick felt his heart speed up. The moment had arrived, the one he knew would come, but for which he was not ready. "Yes," he answered simply. "I knew her." "How?" Patrick flipped the last pancake, buying time. "Let's eat first. Then I have something to show you." Maisie reluctantly agreed, though her curious eyes remained fixed on him as they devoured the pancakes doused in a generous amount of chocolate syrup. After breakfast, Patrick led Maisie to his office. She walked in carefully, as she always did in his sanctuary. But this time, he guided her not to the desk but to a bookshelf along the side wall. "You asked me how I knew your mom when she was little," Patrick began, pulling a large leather-bound book from the shelf. This album might answer that. They sat side by side on the leather sofa, and Patrick opened the album on both their laps. The first page showed a wedding photo, Patrick and Elizabeth, young and full of hope, smiling at the camera. "This is your grandmother, Elizabeth," Patrick explained, pointing to the blonde woman beaming beside him. "She passed away when your mum was very young." Maisie studied the photo closely. She was pretty. "She looks like my mum." "Yes," Patrick agreed, feeling a familiar tightness in his throat. "Your mom got her looks from Elizabeth. And her artistic talent, too." He turned the page, revealing a series of baby photos. A newborn Rachel wrapped in a pink blanket, then in Elizabeth's arms, then in Patrick's own. "That's you," Maisie observed, pointing at an image of Patrick awkwardly holding the baby. "Who's the baby?" Patrick took a deep breath. "That's your mom, Rachel, when she was born." Maisie looked from the photo to Patrick, confused. Then, slowly, comprehension began to form in her eyes. "My mum? But how?" Patrick continued turning pages, showing Rachel growing up. Her first attempts at walking, her birthday parties, beach days, her first bike. "Rachel was my daughter, Maisie," Patrick finally said, his voice betraying the emotion he tried to control. "Your mum was my daughter." Maisie went very still, her blue eyes, Rachel's eyes, Elizabeth's eyes, fixed on Patrick with disconcerting intensity. "You're my grandpa?" she finally asked, her voice small and uncertain. The world seemed to pause for a moment. Grandpa. It was a title Patrick had never prepared for. It sounded strange, scary, and yet, at the same time, completely right. "Yes," he whispered, "I'm your grandfather." Maisie continued to stare at him, processing the information. Patrick waited, tense, for her reaction. Anger, confusion, sadness. "Why didn't you tell me before?" she asked at last. It was a fair question. Patrick looked away, unable to face her innocent gaze. "Because—" He hesitated, searching for an answer a child could understand. "Because it's complicated. Your mum and I, we drifted apart. A long time ago. Before you were born. You fought," Maisie stated. It wasn't a question. Patrick nodded. "Yes. After that, we never spoke again. I didn't even know—" His voice cracked. "I didn't know you existed, Maisie. Until you found me in the rain that day." Maisie frowned, taking it all in. "Mom never talked about you. She only said I should look for the man in the photo if something happened to her." Patrick felt the weight of those words. Rachel had never mentioned him to her daughter. She had erased his existence, just as he had tried to erase hers for so long. "I'm sorry about that," he finally said. "I'm sorry I wasn't there." Maisie looked at the album again, at the photos documenting a family history she had never been told. "Why did you fight with her?" The direct question, so typical of Maisie, caught Patrick off guard. How could he explain years of stubbornness, unmet expectations, and failed communication to a child? "Your mom wanted to be an artist," he began hesitantly. "She wanted to paint and create. I wanted her to work at the company with me. Neither of us could understand the other." Maisie nodded slowly. "Mom was the best painter in the world," she said with conviction. "People cried when they saw her paintings. They were so beautiful." Patrick felt a pang of regret. He had never seen Rachel's mature work. He had never witnessed the full bloom of her talent. "I'm sure they were," he answered softly. Maisie continued flipping through the album, absorbing every image of her mother. Occasionally, she pointed to a photo and asked a question. What was her favorite color when she was little? Or, did she ever have a dog? Patrick answered as best he could, surprised at how easily the memories returned now. It was as though, by sharing them with Maisie, he was bringing Rachel back to life between them. When they reached the end of the album, the final photos showing Rachel as a teenager, before the rift, Maisie closed it carefully. "There aren't any more pictures?" she asked. Patrick shook his head. "Not in this album, but—" He hesitated, then made a decision. "There's a place you might want to see." He stood up and held out his hand. Maisie took it without hesitation. Patrick led her down the upstairs hallway, until they stopped in front of a door that had remained closed for 8 years. He took a deep breath and turned the handle. Rachel's bedroom was exactly as she'd left it the night she left home. The bed had the turquoise comforter she'd chosen herself. The walls were painted a soft lavender. Her desk still had art books piled on it. The shelves were filled with mementos from her childhood and teen years, trophies from school competitions, collections of seashells, small clay sculptures she'd made, and the walls, they were covered in Rachel's drawings and paintings, from her very first childish scribbles to more sophisticated teenage work. "This was your mum's room," Patrick explained as Maisie walked in slowly, her wide eyes taking in every detail. "I left it just as it was." Maisie moved about as if she were in a museum, gently touching objects, studying the paintings on the walls. She stopped at one in particular, a seascape with a vibrant sunset that Rachel had painted at 16. "She always loved painting the ocean," Maisie said softly. "Even when we never had money to travel there, she said she could smell the salty water when she painted." Patrick felt a stabbing guilt. While he lived in his mansion, Rachel and Maisie had struggled financially. While he amassed wealth, his daughter couldn't even afford to take her own daughter to the beach. "Your mum was always talented," he said, joining Maisie in front of the painting, "even when she was very young." "Can I see more?" Maisie asked, pointing to a stack of sketchbooks on a high shelf. "Of course." Patrick retrieved them and placed them on the bed. They sat side by side, and Maisie began leafing through them reverently. They were Rachel's visual diaries, a record of her artistic growth from childhood through adolescence. "Look," Maisie suddenly exclaimed, pointing to a sketch of a woman holding a baby. The date in the corner indicated it was about 9 years old. "That's me and Mom." Patrick looked closer. Indeed, it was a self-portrait of Rachel holding a newborn. Rachel's face glowed with the pure joy of motherhood, a joy Patrick had never seen in his daughter before. "You were a beautiful baby," he commented, feeling a deep ache as he thought of all the moments he had missed. His granddaughter's birth, her first steps, her first words. Maisie spent nearly an hour exploring the sketchbooks, occasionally asking questions but mostly soaking up this new connection with her mum. Patrick stayed beside her, sharing memories when he could, learning along with her when the images came from a time in Rachel's life that he hadn't known. Finally, when the last sketchbook was closed, Maisie looked around the room again, her eyes shining with a new understanding. "My mom grew up here," she said, as if testing the idea. "In this house, in this room." "Yes," Patrick confirmed, "from the day she was born until she left." Maisie was silent for a moment, then fixed that familiar, intense gaze on Patrick. "Can I keep this room?" she asked. "Instead of the guest room?" The question caught Patrick off guard. Rachel's room had remained untouched for so long, like a shrine, a memorial to his failure as a father. The idea of changing it, of allowing life to return, had never occurred to him. But looking at Maisie now, this small piece of Rachel, this continuation of their bloodline, Patrick realized that there was no better way to honor his daughter's memory than to let her daughter find comfort and home in the space once hers. "Would you like that?" he asked. Maisie nodded vigorously. "It would be like having a piece of Mum with me. Like she's hugging me." Patrick felt tears threaten to form, but he held them back. "Then this is your room now." "Can I keep the paintings?" Maisie asked anxiously. "And the books? And everything?" "You can keep whatever you like," Patrick assured her. "And we can also change what you want, make it yours all in your own way." Maisie considered this. "I want to keep the paintings. And the wall color, Mom chose it, right?" Patrick nodded. "Yes, it was her favorite color back then." "Then I want to keep it." Maisie glanced around again. "But maybe we can bring my star lamp. And Cece needs a special spot." Patrick smiled. "We can do that." "Ooh, and anything else you want?" For the first time since he met her, Maisie hugged Patrick spontaneously, flinging her arms around his neck with all the strength her small arms could muster. "Thank you, Grandpa," she whispered against his neck. Grandpa. The word still sounded strange, but now it carried a new emotion, not fear or discomfort, but a kind of reverence. Her title he did not deserve, but was determined to honor. "You're welcome, Maisie," he answered, allowing himself to truly hug her back for the first time. When they pulled apart, Maisie was already planning how to rearrange the room. The bed can go here and the lamp there, and Cece can have a special shelf for her and her friends when they visit. Patrick watched, amazed at how easily life returned to a space that had been frozen in time for so long. Rachel's room, now Maisie's room, would no longer be a locked shrine to painful memories, but a living, breathing space, the way it should be. "What is it?" Maisie asked, noticing his distant expression. Patrick smiled. "I was just thinking your mom would be very happy to know you're here, in this room, in this house." "You think so?" Maisie asked, suddenly serious. Patrick thought of the final words in Rachel's letter, tucked away in his desk drawer. "I hope one day you can love me for who I am, not for who you wanted me to be." "I'm sure," he replied confidently. "She sent you here after all. She knew that, despite everything, this would be your home." Maisie smiled, satisfied with his answer. "So can we bring my stuff in today? And then go to the park, like you promised." "Sounds like a perfect plan," Patrick agreed, extending his hand to her. Together, they left the room, no longer a mausoleum for painful memories, but the start of something new, a space where past and present converged, where Rachel's legacy lived on through her daughter. Finally, a home once again. Patrick Gibson's life had changed completely in the last 2 weeks. The alarm clock that once woke him at 5 in the morning for emails and reports now marked a new commitment: breakfast with Maisie at 7:30. "You can't just have coffee," she declared one morning, eyeing Patrick's solitary cup. "Mom said your brain needs real food." And so, Patrick's first daily meeting was no longer with his executive team, but with a small person wearing pajamas who had strong opinions about nutrition. "Do you have an important meeting today?" she asked, chewing her toast. "Two, actually." "About what?" "About buying other companies," he replied simply. Maisie drank her juice and asked, "Do you like your job?" The question caught him off guard. Did he? It had been so long since he'd asked himself that. "It's challenging," he answered, "and important. More important than people." Patrick nearly choked on his coffee. Maisie's questions were always like that, too direct. "Where'd you get that idea?" "You said Mom left because you two fought about work, so I figured maybe you thought work was more important than people." "I used to think so," he admitted, "but I'm learning I was wrong." The smile Maisie gave him was worth more than any multi-million-dollar contract. Evenings had also changed. Where there were once reports and solitary whiskey, now there were bedtime stories. It all started on the first night after she moved into Rachel's old room. "Could you tell me a story?" Maisie asked. "Mom always told me one." And so, sitting on the edge of his daughter's former bed, Patrick began sharing small fragments of Rachel's childhood. The first bike without training wheels, the tooth that fell out in an apple at lunchtime, the scary night in the treehouse. Each night a new story, a new memory retrieved. By the third week, Patrick adjusted his schedule to be home every evening by 7. Post-work calls could wait. Urgent emails were answered only after Maisie was asleep. His assistant noticed the change immediately. "Is everything okay, Mr. Gibson?" she asked when he cancelled his third evening meeting in a row. "Never been better," he replied, surprising them both. Weekends took on new purpose too. On Saturday, they went to the zoo. Patrick hadn't been to one since Rachel was 10, and rediscovered it now through Maisie's wide-eyed wonder. "Did you know giraffes have the same number of neck vertebrae as us?" she informed him with scientific seriousness. "Theirs are just way bigger." "I didn't know that. Where did you learn?" "In the book Mom gave me. I know lots of things about animals." And indeed she did. Throughout the visit, Maisie shared surprising facts about every creature they saw. Patrick found himself absorbing information about pandas and turtles with the same interest he once reserved for financial reports. Sunday brought an impromptu painting lesson. Maisie had found Rachel's art supplies and asked to use them. "Do you want to teach me to paint?" Patrick asked, half joking. To his surprise, Maisie took the question seriously. "I can try. Mom taught me a few things." And so, the formidable CEO spent an afternoon sitting on the floor, learning how to blend colors under the patient guidance of an 8-year-old. "You're holding the brush too tight," Maisie observed. "Mom said you have to hold it like a little bird. firm enough so it doesn't fly away, but gentle enough so you don't hurt it. Patrick loosened his grip, reflecting on how often in life he had held on to things, relationships, expectation, far too tightly. His final painting, a swirl of colors vaguely resembling a landscape, was far from a masterpiece, but Maisie's approving smile filled him with pride. "It's not bad for a first time," she said generously. "Mom said everyone has to start somewhere." "Your mom was wise." "Yes," Maisie agreed. "She was the smartest person in the world. After me, of course." The declaration, made with such solemnity, took Patrick by surprise. A laugh escaped him, not the polite, controlled laugh he used at social events, but a genuine, spontaneous laugh from somewhere long dormant. Maisie stared at him surprised, then joined in. "You look different when you laugh," she observed afterward. "Younger." Patrick didn't know what to say. When was the last time he laughed like that? That Monday, he received an invitation for Grandparents' Day at Maisie's school. He looked at his schedule. He had a crucial meeting with Japanese investors set months ago. "I'll be there," he answered without hesitation. That night, Maisie greeted him at the door, practically bouncing with excitement. "Did the teacher call? Can you go?" "Yes, I'll be there. I'm going to make a special drawing," she announced, "and I'll tell everyone my grandpa is the best in the world, even if he's terrible at painting." Patrick laughed again, more easily this time. As they prepared dinner together, he realized he was learning how to be a grandfather, not just fulfilling a duty, but genuinely learning to be present, to listen, to care about the small things. Finally learning what he hadn't learned in time for Rachel, that life wasn't just about big achievements, but about little daily connections, shared meals, bedtime stories, spontaneous laughter. He was learning, at last, to be a family. Patrick woke with a strangled cry, his heart pounding. He looked around, disoriented, as the images of the nightmare still danced before his eyes. In the darkness of his room, the sense of loss was almost tangible, a physical weight on his chest. In the dream, Maisie had vanished. The house was empty, devoid of every trace of her presence. No drawings on the fridge, no children's book on the sofa, no laughter in the corridors. He searched for her in mounting desperation, calling her name until his voice gave out. Then suddenly, in the dream, he was back at that rainy afternoon in front of his building. But this time, there was no little girl waiting. Only the torn photograph of Rachel on the wet sidewalk, its colors dissolving in the rain, as though Maisie had never existed, as though the second chance had been just a temporary illusion. Patrick turned on the bedside lamp and looked at the clock. 3:20 a.m. His entire body trembled, covered in cold sweat. He tried taking several deep breaths, but the agony of the nightmare clung to him like a shadow. Before he realized what he was doing, he was on his feet, walking down the dark hallway toward Maisie's room. He had to see her, confirm she was still there, that she hadn't disappeared like in his dream. The door was slightly open, as she always asked him to leave it. Patrick peered inside, holding his breath. There she was, sleeping peacefully under the soft glow of the star lamp. Cece clutched against her chest, hair spread across the pillow like strands of gold. Her face wore that serene expression unique to sleeping children, complete trust in the world around them, certain they were safe. A lump rose in Patrick's throat. She trusted him. She believed he would keep her safe, be steady and reliable, that he wouldn't fail her the way he failed Rachel. He returned to his room, but sleep was gone. He sat in the armchair by the window, staring at the distant city lights, while his mind swirled with old and new fears. What if he failed Maisie the way he'd failed Rachel? What if his fixation on work, his struggle to show affection, his tendency to control rather than understand, ended up driving Maisie away too? What if he didn't know how to be the grandfather she deserved? Patrick remembered his mistakes with Rachel, how he'd dismissed her artistic aspirations as a phase-gee teenage rebellion that would pass. How he'd tried to force her into the mold he'd built for her, without considering her dreams or talents. How he'd reacted with ultimatums when she resisted. How his pride prevented him from seeking reconciliation after she left. 8 lost years. 8 years that could have been filled with conversations, gradual understanding, mutual growth. 8 years he would never get back. And now there was Maisie. A second chance he knew he didn't deserve, but refused to squander, yet the fear consumed him. Fear of repeating old mistakes. Fear that his controlling instincts would resurface at the worst moment. Fear that his old self, the Patrick Gibson obsessed with results, achievements, power, would sabotage the new version he was trying to become. Through the window, he saw the first hint of dawn turn the horizon a pale pink. In a few hours, Maisie would be awake. She would come downstairs holding Cece, hair messy, eyes still sleepy, but already asking questions he couldn't possibly answer. She would look at him with those eyes, Rachel's eyes, Elizabeth's eyes, full of unwavering trust. And he would try. Despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, despite the voice inside that whispered it was too late to change, that some patterns were too deeply ingrained to break. Patrick had never been a gambling man. He liked certainties, controlled variables, calculated risks. But Maisie was not an equation to solve or a company to acquire. She was a child, his granddaughter, the last living link to Rachel, an unexpected gift that arrived on a rainy afternoon. In the growing morning light, Patrick made a silent promise to himself, to Rachel, and most of all to Maisie. He didn't know exactly how to be the grandfather she needed, but he would learn, day by day, mistake by mistake, attempt by attempt, because he finally understood what he hadn't before. True love wasn't about possessing, controlling, or shaping. It was about accompanying, supporting, growing together. It was having the courage to be imperfect, to try even when afraid, to risk your heart knowing it might be broken. It was the scariest risk he had ever faced, and the most important one. Saturday dawned perfectly, a clear blue sky and mild weather, the kind of day tailor-made for being outdoors. Patrick stood at the kitchen window while Maisie devoured her breakfast, a waffle with strawberries and honey that Martha had prepared especially for her. "So what do you want to do today?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Maisie had been talking about Central Park all week, ever since a classmate mentioned the little rental boats on the lake. "Can we go to the park?" Maisie asked, exactly as he expected, her eyes shining with anticipation. "And ride the little boats, please." "I think we can arrange that," Patrick said with feigned seriousness, as if weighing a complex business proposal. Maisie saw through the act and grinned, a grin that seemed to light up the entire kitchen. Patrick still marveled at how easily she smiled, despite all she had lost, all the upheaval in her young life. Rachel had raised a resilient daughter. Half an hour later, they were in the car on the way to the park. Maisie looked out the window, pointing at everything interesting she spotted: an especially large dog being walked, a store window full of colorful toys, a man playing saxophone on the sidewalk. "Mr. Abernathy, my music teacher, said we'll learn about saxophones next month," she mentioned. "Do you like music class?" Patrick asked, realizing he knew surprisingly little about Maisie's daily school routine, even though he'd been caring for her nearly 2 months now. "It's fun, but I like art better. Mrs. Collins says I have talent," she answered with a mix of pride and shyness. Patrick smiled. "Like your mom." "That's what Mrs. Collins said too." "I told her my mom was an artist." A wave of gratitude washed over Patrick. Maisie's art teacher, a woman he'd never met, had recognized and nurtured the link between mother and daughter. It was more than he had done when Rachel was alive. "Your mom started drawing very young too," he said. "When she was about your age, she drew on everything. Book margins, napkins, even the walls once." "I never drew on the walls," Maisie declared indignantly, as if the mere idea were absurd. Patrick laughed. She thought it was a good idea at the time, too. "Did you get mad?" The question was soft, almost tentative. Patrick felt a clench in his chest at the memory. Yes, he had gotten mad. Actually, furious. He yelled at Rachel and forbade her from using crayons for an entire month. A harsh punishment for a 6-year-old expressing creativity in the only way she knew. "I did," he admitted. "More than I should have." The car stopped at a red light, and Patrick glanced at Maisie. She was watching him with a look far beyond her years, as if weighing not only what he said but also all he left unsaid. "People make mistakes," she offered finally. "Mum said the important thing is learning from them." The light turned green, and Patrick focused on driving, trying to swallow the lump in his throat. Where did so much wisdom come from in someone so young? When they arrived at Central Park, it was bustling with families enjoying the perfect day. Kids were running on the grass, couples strolling hand in hand, groups of friends spreading blankets for impromptu picnics. Patrick usually avoided crowded places, but today, strangely, the park's vibrant energy felt uplifting instead of draining. "Can we go to the boats first?" Maisie asked the moment they got out of the car, practically bouncing in excitement. "Don't you want to walk around a bit first? See the rest of the park?" "Boats first, then exploring," she negotiated with the seriousness of an international diplomat. Patrick gave in, as he'd been doing more often. There was something liberating in following a child's pace, letting her pure excitement guide them rather than a rigid plan. The lake was dotted with small rental boats, each occupied by smiling families or love-struck couples. A considerable line had formed at the pier. "Looks like we're not the only ones with this idea," Patrick commented, preparing Maisie for a possible wait. To his surprise, she wasn't discouraged. "We can watch the ducks while we wait. Look how many." And so they did. For 20 minutes, they stood there by the lake, watching the ducks glide gracefully across the water. Maisie narrated imaginary tales about the duck families. Which one was the mum? Which one was the dad? Which were the mischievous ducklings? "That one's the grandpa duck," she pointed to a particularly large, imposing bird. "He's teaching the little ones how to swim properly." Patrick smiled at her obvious projection, but said nothing. He was learning that sometimes the best thing to do was just listen. When their turn finally came, a young, friendly attendant helped them into one of the blue boats. "First time?" he asked Patrick, handing him the oars. "Yes," Patrick admitted. "At least with her." He nodded toward Maisie, who was already settled comfortably at the bow, gazing at the water with fascination. "Well, it's not complicated. Just keep a steady rhythm and try not to collide with other boats," the attendant advised with a smile. "Have fun." Patrick nodded and began to row. It was more challenging than it looked, especially for someone whose only form of exercise in recent years had been the treadmill and occasional golf with clients. His arms protested the unfamiliar effort. "We're going in circles," Maisie observed after a few minutes. Laughing, Patrick realized she was right. Despite his efforts, the boat had nearly completed a perfect loop, returning to the starting point. "Looks like I need practice," he admitted, feeling strangely unconcerned with his own clumsiness. The old Patrick would have been furious at himself for not instantly mastering a skill, even something as trivial as rowing a rental boat. This new Patrick was learning to laugh at his own mistakes. "Let me try," Maisie asked, stretching her hands toward the oars. "They're too big for you," Patrick warned, but he let her hold one of the oars along with him. Together, they managed to set a rhythm, irregular but functional. The boat began moving away from the shore, gliding across the sparkling surface of the water. "We're doing it," Maisie exclaimed, her face glowing with the kind of pure delight only children seem capable of feeling. For half an hour, they cruised the lake, pointing out ducks and other boats, occasionally waving at strangers as though they were old friends. Patrick couldn't remember the last time he'd done something so simple and so satisfying. When they returned to the dock, Maisie's cheeks were flushed from the sun and the effort, her eyes bright with excitement. "Can we have a picnic now?" she asked, as they handed back their life jackets. "I'm starving." "Sure," Patrick agreed. He'd asked Martha to prepare a basket with sandwiches, gowns, fruit and juice. They found the perfect spot under a big, leafy tree, with a view of a field where children were playing frisbee. Patrick spread out the blanket he'd brought and started pulling food from the basket. "Turkey and cheese sandwich for you," he said, handing Maisie a carefully wrapped package, "and apple juice." "Thanks," she replied automatically, already unwrapping the sandwich with gusto. They ate in a comfortable silence, watching the people around them. A group of teenagers juggled nearby. An elderly couple walked slowly, holding hands. A mother read a book to 3 attentive children, little glimpses of lives being lived, moments being created. "This is the best day," Maisie declared suddenly, mouth half full of sandwich. "It is?" Patrick asked, genuinely curious. She nodded emphatically. Yes, boats, picnic, parks, all we need is ice cream to make it perfect. Patrick smiled. Well, we can't let the day be just great when it can be perfect, right? Let's get ice cream after we eat. Maisie's face lit up like Christmas. She finished her sandwich in record time, waiting impatiently while Patrick packed up the picnic leftovers. The nearest ice cream place was at the edge of the park, a small, colorful shop with a line snaking out the door. Once again, they waited patiently, Maisie still pointing out interesting sights around them. When it was finally their turn, she ordered strawberry ice cream with chocolate sauce and rainbow sprinkles. Patrick chose plain vanilla, earning a look of disapproval from Maisie. Vanilla is boring, she pronounced as they walked back into the park with their cones. Grandpa should try something different. Patrick nearly stumbled. It was the first time Maisie had called him Grandpa spontaneously, without hesitation or self-correction. And not just in private, but out in public, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. She kept walking and licking her cone, completely unaware of the monumental impact of her words. To her, it was just a casual comment about ice cream preferences. To Patrick, it was validation of something he hadn't even known he yearned for so deeply. Belonging, connection, family. For the first time in decades, maybe for the first time ever, Patrick felt he truly belonged to someone. Not as a boss, not as an authority figure, not as a respected businessman or feared CEO, but simply as Grandpa. A title not earned by accomplishments or power, but freely given through love. It's melting, Maisie noted, pointing at Patrick's cone dripping down the sides while he stood there, momentarily paralyzed by emotion. Oh, yes, he said, snapping back to reality and quickly licking the melting edges. I got distracted. Thinking about work, she asked, a question that had become common between them. No, Patrick answered honestly. Thinking about how this is a perfect day. Maisie smiled and her face smeared with strawberry ice cream and pure happiness. I told you. They walked side by side along the park's shaded paths, her small hand occasionally brushing against his, leaving sticky ice cream traces he didn't mind at all. Grandpa. So simple, so transformative. That sunny afternoon in the park, between boat rides and ice cream, Patrick Gibson finally understood what Rachel had tried to show him all those years ago. That life wasn't measured by closed deals or accumulated fortunes. It was measured in moments like this, imperfect, smeared with ice cream, and absolutely priceless. The hearing for permanent custody was set for the end of the month. Patrick had spent the last few weeks working with his lawyers to ensure the process went smoothly. No other relatives were contesting Maisie's custody, and all the social workers' reports were extraordinarily positive. Even so, Patrick couldn't shake a flicker of anxiety whenever he thought about it. What if something went wrong? What if, for some reason, the judge decided that a 60-year-old self-confessed workaholic wasn't the right person to raise a child? Those thoughts plagued him that morning as he tried to focus on financial reports in his home office. It was Sunday, but some habits died hard, even though he now limited his at-home work to times when Maisie was busy with something else. At that moment, she was playing in the yard with Lily, Martha's 13-year-old daughter, who occasionally came on weekends and had become something of an older sister figure to Maisie. Patrick could hear them laughing outside, a sound that still surprised him whenever it filtered through the once silent windows of the mansion. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he said, expecting Martha with the coffee he'd requested. Instead, it was Maisie who appeared, cheeks flushed from playing outside, a big smile on her face, and a sheet of paper in her hands. "Grandpa, look what I made!" she exclaimed, walking up to his desk without the hesitation she'd shown in her first weeks there. Patrick smiled and pushed the reports aside, giving her his full attention. "Let's see your masterpiece." Maisie proudly handed him the paper. It was a colorful drawing of the house, not the real grey, austere mansion, but the idealized version in Maisie's eyes. Bright blue with multicolored flowers in the garden, a rainbow in the sky, and 3 stick figures out front holding hands, one small Maisie, one tall Patrick, and one medium that Patrick instantly recognized as Rachel, even in a child's depiction. "It's lovely, Maisie," Patrick said with genuine admiration. "You've got your mum's talent." "It's our family," she explained, pointing to the figures, Me, you, and Mom. She's not really here, but she's watching us, like the stars. Patrick felt that familiar lump in his throat. The way Maisie spoke of Rachel, with sadness, yes, but also a level of acceptance many adults never reach after a loss, never ceased to move him. It's perfect, he managed. Shall we hang it on the fridge? Maisie shook her head. No, this one is for your office. For when you're working and need to remember you have a family waiting. Patrick looked at his granddaughter, momentarily speechless. How could an 8-year-old be so perceptive, so consciously kind? That's exactly what I need, he agreed, getting up to look for tape. Together, they taped the drawing on the wall behind Patrick's desk, right next to his Harvard diploma, which had stood alone until now. The contrast between them was almost comical, the formal document in its austere frame and the brightly colored child's drawing radiating carefree joy. Perfect, Maisie declared, taking a step back to admire it. That was when she tilted her head slightly, a gesture Patrick now recognized as a sign that a surprising comment or question was coming. You smile differently now, she observed, studying his face with that intensity that seemed to see far beyond the surface. What do you mean? Patrick asked, genuinely curious. Before when you smiled and it was just your mouth, Maisie explained, touching her own lips to demonstrate. Now it's everything. Your eyes, your cheeks, everything. It's a real smile. Patrick blinked, surprised. He hadn't thought about it, but realized she was right. For years, maybe decades, his smile had been a social tool, something calculated and controlled. A necessary concession at meetings and events, never a genuine expression of joy. When did you become so observant? He asked, stalling for time while absorbing her words. Maisie shrugged. That childlike gesture that said, I've always been this way. You just didn't notice. Mom said we have to pay attention to people. Not just what they say, but how they say it. Their eyes, their smiles. She paused, considering something. Why do you smile differently now? The question hung between them, simple but profound. Patrick could have dodged or offered a generic answer. But in the last few months, he had learned that Maisie deserved honesty, especially when the truth was difficult. Because you taught me what matters, he finally said. Maisie frowned slightly, processing his response. What matters? Patrick looked at the drawing on the wall, the bright blue house, the colorful flowers, the 3 figures holding hands under the rainbow. The family Maisie saw, the family she helped create out of 2 broken lives. That, he replied, pointing to the drawing. Family, love, being present, all the things I forgot for so long. Maisie appeared satisfied. Mom would have liked your new smile, she said firmly. She always said real smiles were contagious. Your mom was right, Patrick agreed, feeling that familiar mix of pain and gratitude whenever Rachel was mentioned. She always was. A comfortable silence followed. Outside, they could hear Lily calling Maisie's name. Can I go back to playing? Maisie asked, already moving toward the door. Sure. Just remember we have that appointment later. Maisie's face lit up at the reminder. Buying paint for my room. Exactly. 2 o'clock. I won't forget, she promised, already dashing out the door, leaving behind a burst of energy in her wake. Patrick sat back down, but instead of returning to the financial reports, he turned his chair to face the garden view. From there, he could see Maisie and Lily running across the lawn, immersed in some elaborate game, with lots of dramatic gestures and laughter. The garden, like the whole house, was different now. Not just because of Patrick's detailed plans for a play area with swings and a slide soon to be installed, but because of the simple presence of life. A space once impeccably maintained by professional gardeners to impress occasional visitors now had a purpose. It had laughter. Inside the house, the changes were even more apparent. Maisie's room, once Rachel's room, was now truly alive. The walls were still that original lavender shade, but now filled with drawings, animal posters, and Rachel's original paintings alongside Maisie's early attempts at following her mother's artistic footsteps. The bed was awash with colorful pillows and stuffed animals that had joined Cece in recent weeks. New shelves held a growing collection of children's books. On the ceiling, In addition to the star lamp, Patrick had hired an artist to paint a solar system mural after Maisie became suddenly fascinated by astronomy. But it wasn't just Maisie's room that had changed. The entire house seemed to have awakened from a long sleep. Books lay in the living room, toys occasionally forgotten under tables, children's drawings plastered on the fridge, and even an aquarium with 2 goldfish named Bubbles and Sparkle in the TV room, a result of a visit to a school science fair. Martha, who had worked for Patrick for over 15 years, remarked the previous week that the house finally felt like a home. She'd said it with a smile, suggesting she'd waited a long time to see this transformation. A home. The word still felt strange to Patrick when applied to the mansion that had always been little more than a status symbol, a backdrop for his life as a successful CEO. But it was true. The house had become a home, pulsing with life, with memories taking shape in every room. Patrick thought about the upcoming custody hearing. His lawyers were confident, and the social worker had been very positive in her last report, especially after witnessing the bond that had formed between him and Maisie. Still, he couldn't help the underlying fear. Not the fear of failing as a guardian as he'd had in the beginning, but a deeper fear of losing Maisie, of losing this second chance, of losing the home they'd built together. Because Patrick now fully recognized the truth. It wasn't he who had saved Maisie that rainy afternoon. It was Maisie who had saved him, from his loneliness, from his bitterness, from the cold, distant man he had become. Every innocent question, every surprising observation, every spontaneous hug had chipped away at the wall he'd built around his heart after Rachel left. Every peal of laughter echoing through the once quiet corridors brought life to a space that had been just an empty shell, impressive on the outside, hollow on the inside. The phone on his desk rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was his assistant, Diane, calling on a Sunday, something that would have been common months ago but was now rare. "Mr. Gibson, I'm sorry to bother you on the weekend, but there's an issue with the Westwood acquisition. Mr. Harrington is insisting on a conference call this afternoon. He says it's urgent." The old Patrick would have immediately rearranged his day. He would have cancelled any personal commitments without hesitation. Business was business, and everything else could wait. The new Patrick, the Patrick with the different smile, didn't hesitate at all. "Tell Harrington I'm unavailable today. I have a non-negotiable appointment with my granddaughter. We can schedule a call tomorrow at 9. "He won't like that," Diane warned, though Patrick could hear approval in her voice. "He'll survive," Patrick replied simply. "Anything else, Diane?" "No, sir, enjoy your Sunday." Patrick hung up, feeling a peculiar lightness. 6 months ago, the idea of postponing a meeting with one of Gibson Enterprises' biggest investors to buy paint for a child's room would have seemed absurd. Now it seemed like the only choice, not that his commitment to business had lessened. Surprisingly, many people in the company had noticed he was more focused, more efficient, more present in the meetings he did attend. It was as though Maisie's presence had clarified his priorities in every area of his life, not just at home. "The House of Smiles," Maisie had declared the previous week when Patrick asked which color she wanted for her room. "That's what we're going to call our house now. Not Gibson Mansion, House of Smiles." Patrick had smiled, a real smile, with eyes and cheeks and everything, as Maisie had observed, and agreed. House of Smiles. Why not? It was certainly more accurate now than any grand name reflecting only the size or cost of the property. Movement in the yard caught his attention. Maisie was now sitting on the grass, making a daisy chain crown at the edge of the lawn. Her face was serious with concentration, her tongue slightly out the way Rachel used to do when she focused. Patrick thought about the photo of Rachel at her graduation, which he still kept on his desk. Her determined, hopeful smile, showing she was ready to conquer the world on her own terms, not his. Rachel had followed her path. Despite all obstacles, she had raised an extraordinary daughter, alone. And then, in her final act of love and hope, she had sent that daughter back to him, trusting that this time he would be able to love without conditions, to accept without trying to control. A second chance. That was what Maisie represented. Not just for him to be a better grandfather than he'd been as a father, but to finally learn what Rachel had tried to teach him all along. that true success isn't measured in bank accounts or corporate empires, but in the capacity to love and be loved. Patrick watched as Maisie finished her flower crown and proudly placed it on her head. Lily applauded the result, and both of them laughed. The sound floated across the yard and in through the open window, filling the office with brightness. A small moment, insignificant to the world, monumental to Patrick. He shut down the computer without even saving the reports he'd been reviewing. They could wait. The paint for the bedroom, the flower crown, the laughter in the yard, those things couldn't. As he stood to join the girls outside, Patrick glanced one last time at Maisie's drawing on the wall. The bright blue house, the colorful flowers, the three figures holding hands. That was her home. And now, it was his too. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.